5 true freshmen last year. A lot of them played, and this year will be no different as well. If you look around at every single position that we have, outside of quarterback and outside of defensive tackle, you're going to see a true freshman playing. You'll see a true freshman at DB, at linebacker, at defensive end, at tight end, offensive line, running back, and wide receiver. And potentially an area in special teams also. So we like the group. They're freshmen. We're going to have to live with some growing pains early on, but they're great young men, good players, and have big futures here at Carolina.
Side Thompson at left, and then maybe Tree mixes in there. We'll have to see, but he's a nice option to have if he's your first guy, your sixth man, so to say.
Well, here's my thing with that. You look at last season where Tree and Shro had to start on the offensive line just because it was a group that was so decimated by injuries, where, yes, those guys were pretty highly touted guys coming out of high school, and you did believe in their abilities. But this is different because, and knock on wood, everybody stays healthy this year, where you're not forced into starting some guys. If Josiah Thompson is legitimately your best option at left tackle, then he should absolutely be out there on the field. Now, again, you don't typically start those kind of guys as true freshmen in their first game, but if he's your best choice at that spot, then absolutely throw him out there.
No, you play the best. Like, that's the whole thing with Shane Beamer and this team. And he said it before. You have to play your best every week to win, and that's that's the key for him. So I think with this offensive line, I think if he's the best guy, he should be playing. And it says a lot that he was able to go out here, and if he does end up getting the job, he's able to beat out a guy like Tree Babalade, who we said was the starter last year at left tackle. So that really just shows how good this guy is, and it's not just hype; it's the truth.
So kind of running through that list of positions where he said freshmen were going to be playing. This doesn't mean they're going to be starting. And most of these positions, you are going to rotate guys anyway. So that in and of itself is its own thing. But defensive back, where you look at that room, and that's not necessarily being limited to just safety or cornerback, but we've heard plenty of good things about Jalewis Solomon. David Busey is somebody that's getting a lot of attention here lately, whether that be from an actual defensive standpoint or what he's going to be able to do on special teams. It sounds like he's going to find his way onto the field this season.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about David Busey, and he's someone that, it's kind of a crowded secondary because you obviously have Nicky Manwari and DQ Smith starting at the safety positions. You'll have Jalen Kilgore, Gerald Kilgore, guys like that. And then, DB, it's O'Donnell Fortune starting there. You got Judge Coyer, Emery Floyd, Fakari Swing. You have a lot of different guys. How does a freshman like David Busey fit into the mix? It seems like he's definitely going to play this year from what has been said. And he even spoke to us a little bit, I think, last week. And it seems like if he's not playing a ton in the secondary, special teams would probably be something where we see him a good bit. And that wouldn't surprise me as a freshman, just because that's the identity of South Carolina. If you're not playing, you'll find a role in special teams more likely than not.
Linebacker sounds like J.R. Johnson, somebody that's going to find his way onto the field, and that's part of that rotation with a lot of those veteran guys. Defensive end, obviously edge, that being Dylan Stewart, who's definitely going to play a big part in this defense. Tight end sounds like Michael Smith's been impressing a lot of people. We've seen clips of him in the scrimmages and in practice scenarios where he's going out there making a lot of plays. We just mentioned Josiah Thompson on the offensive line. Matthew Fuller at running back is getting a lot of attention, a lot of buzz in camp. Then Mazio Bennett is also turning a lot of heads. He could legitimately be one of your main contributors at wide receiver from what it sounds like.
Yeah, Shane Beamer said he will play a lot this year, or a lot next week, but you have to presume like he's going to be a big factor for South Carolina this year. Now, I wonder how that shakes out. Like, I mean, with wide receiver, it's so interesting because again, they both like him and Dowell Loggins have both said it's going to be by committee this year. So there's not going to be a Xavier Legette type receiver out there. How does that shake out? Will anyone ever really be able to separate themselves? I'm not sure, but I do feel like they have a good mix of guys to where you can share the reps and it still work out. And maybe like Dowell Loggins wants to do, it'll create more balance in that receiver room.
Well, one guy that was in that receiver room that is no longer anymore was Amari Huggins Bruce. He was one of the many transfers that came in this offseason from the University of Louisville, and kind of in that same skill set and size as a Jared Brown and some of these other guys they brought in. But we had not heard a lot about him as of late, and questions started to come up, and some rumors were running about a couple days ago, but we did learn last night officially that Amari Huggins Bruce is no longer with the South Carolina football team.
Yeah, Shane Beamer confirmed it last night that he is no longer with the team, and we had heard about it for a few days now. It was even asked about in the coordinator's press conference to Dowell Loggins the other day, but Dowell said, you get to go ask Shane about that. And obviously the media did. And so he's now re-enrolled back at Louisville. And people have been asking, well, how does that work with the transfer portal and stuff? Well, it seems that he, basically dropped out of USC, re-enrolled at Louisville. And then if he decides to join the football program, that's the thing. He hasn't officially joined the team yet.
Right.
If he does decide to, he will have to walk on. So I guess that's kind of how you get around it. It's confusing in this day and age with how the transfer portal works. And
Sure.
But that seems to be the way things are heading.
Yeah. So essentially, he is just a student at the University of Louisville right now, and if he wanted to join the football team, he'd have to walk on.
Yeah, correct. That sounds right. And for what this means for South Carolina's receiver room in general, I don't think it's really a significant loss because that means either A, it just wasn't a good fit for him, or B, he wasn't going to be getting a lot of playing time. So that means there's probably guys ahead of him in that room. And for South Carolina, I think he was just not to say he wasn't important at all, but they have a lot of other guys to where it's like, okay,
right,
they'll be fine. Like it creates more targets for the rest of those guys in the receiver room. And it kind of all adds up now because you see a guy like Davis Bevel be recently put on scholarship. And it's interesting because we didn't really hear about it when, Bradley Dunn and Ronnie Porter both got put on scholarship. And you see the whole video and stuff. No Davis Bevel and that. So it's kind of interesting that how things have kind of worked out recently.
And that is kind of funny when Beamer was talking to you guys in the media the other day, and, he mentioned Davis Bevel being put on scholarship. I forget who asked him, was like, okay, does that mean you guys have your full allotment of scholarships? And he kind of ducked the question, which I thought was kind of weird, but maybe now we kind of understand that a little bit.
So that's probably what ended up happening is probably, AHB decided, I'm going to go re-enroll back at Louisville. And that ended up opening up a scholarship. And that's probably what happened here. So you wish him the best, but at the same time, I think South Carolina will be fine. So.
But it's not the first funky thing we've seen in the transfer portal, and certainly won't be the last. That's for sure.
No, absolutely not. This is something that everyone's just going to have to get used to, and there's always a lot of questions about these sort of things. But I think we have a definitive answer of what the deal is now.
Again, 8 days away from seeing South Carolina square off with Old Dominion next Saturday at Williams-Brice Stadium, kicking off the 2024 season. As we've been doing a lot here lately, more predictions coming out about what South Carolina is going to look like this year. What does USA Today have to say about the Gamecocks in 2024? We'll hit that in just a minute. Real quick, though, I want to let you know, Sips and Sounds, the only craft beer, wine, and spirits tasting event held indoors under the cool AC, no rain, no heat, no worries, is coming to the Columbia area. Unlimited sampling of over 40 brands of local and national craft beers, wines, seltzers, and spirits. Live performances by Ken and Drew of Sister Hazel, Days and the Donovan Twins, Saturday, September 28th. Get your unlimited tasting wristbands now at sipsandsoundscola.com. Again, that's sipsandsoundscola.com. We're broadcasting live out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 Game Summer Golf Classic. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central going up until 10 here on the game. You have a read here, Ed. Okay. Is everything lit up for Internet PC? Because our sound's not coming through on the live stream.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central hanging out with you on your Friday. We're at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Everybody's abandoned us in here because they've gotten out on the links now. I think Preston has hit the ceremonial first tee shot, which is his job and obligation here at this event. And yeah, it looks like everybody's starting to head out there for what looks to be a absolutely gorgeous day for golf.
I hope Preston's got a good swing because you don't want to screw up on the first shot of the whole thing.
Well,
so.
now they have the golf gun.
Yeah,
Terry was telling me about that, where you can just cock that thing back and shoot it off that way.
interesting. But yeah,
that's my kind of golf.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
like,
that definitely is.
Forget about a tee shot. Give me that thing.
Exactly. No, but it looks like really nice out today. I mean, beautiful day for golf, and yeah, hopefully it's a good day for everyone playing.
Well, and again, this is our annual Summer Golf Classic that shows you we're right on the cusp of football season getting ready to start. Again, 8 days away from South Carolina and Old Dominion. And as we've been doing for a lot of this offseason, anytime we get projections from a national standpoint or even, local media and stuff that view South Carolina, it's interesting to see what they think the record's going to be. USA Today put out their projections for every college football team, all 134 FBS teams. And much like a lot of other people around the country, they project South Carolina to be at 5-7, like the ESPN FPI and so many other metrics predict the Gamecocks to be, which would once again mean they are missing a bowl game this year.
Yeah, and look, it's not a surprise because I feel like the thing is with people, picking how this team's going to finish, it's really no in between. It's not like a solid concrete thing where it's like, 6 wins. It's either, people are thinking they'll exceed expectations and get maybe 7 to 8 wins, or it's they're going to go back and win 5 games or less again. So there really is no in between. It's not surprising to see the big outlets, like USA Today and, companies and websites like that picking South Carolina to not do particularly well this year. But again, they have a tough schedule and they don't understand. I guess they don't see the day-to-day aspect of what goes on like we do. So it's
right.
different.
Yeah, well, we're ingrained in this every single day. We know the storylines of this team. We know which position groups are a lot better than they were a year ago, which I think we can confidently say there are quite a few on this team that are. I think the best projection I've seen from a national standpoint, Saturday Down South had them going 6-6.
Yeah.
So essentially, I think they had them meeting Texas A&M, and that was essentially the 6th win of the season. When you add in the ones that we feel pretty comfortable that South Carolina is going to be able to win. So that's about the bar that I've seen set nationally at this point, which is difficult in and of itself to get to because we know how hard this schedule is. But I do think if people were more in tune with what's happening day to day, they might have a little more confidence in this team.
No, totally. I just can't see a way. There is a way, but realistically, I think this team's too good to not win 6 games. I think they could definitely clear it. It's just going to have to depend on if things can really click for them and go in their favor. But I do think this team is more than capable of getting to that 6-win mark and not taking another step back after last year.
Certainly hope so. Looking around at some of these other projections that USA Today has, and again, this is for all of college football, this has become a very common trend that I've seen. No undefeated teams.
That's something I noticed too.
So they have Georgia at the top of the SEC at 11-1 record, Ohio State at the top of the Big Ten, also with an 11-1 record. And all these conferences have expanded to where everybody's schedule across the entire country is tough. Nobody, especially these contenders for the college football playoff, as Leslie shows us her Michigan paraphernalia, that I don't have a lot of confidence they're going to make it back to the playoff this year. Just saying.
Yeah.
Hey, you got your title this past year. You can live off of that for a while, right? She just has to win one. That's it. That's right.
Oh man.
Which you know what? If we're talking about Ohio State being 11-1, maybe that's the game again. That has been the Achilles heel to Ryan Day these past 3 years, is he can't beat Michigan. And yes, Jim Harbaugh's gone now. They've lost a lot of talent from that team last year. And if Ohio State doesn't beat Michigan this year, there's going to be some awkward conversations up there in Columbus.
I'll say this. If they don't beat Michigan, because at that point, you're probably predicting Oregon to probably beat Ohio State already
right.
in Eugene. And Ohio State might have another loss somewhere on the schedule. So my point is that if they lose that game to Michigan, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, if you miss the playoff, Ryan Day has got to be out of a job, right?
Right. By the way, it's still so funny to look at Big Ten standings.
It's crazy.
Oregon, Southern Cal, Washington, UCLA. Like, I know we're going to get used to it. But like tomorrow, like SMU plays tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, that's an ACC team now. Like that does not sound normal. I gotta get used to saying that more and more.
It's so strange to me, and I wish we would go back.
ACC legend Eric Dickerson, by the way.
Very, very legendary. But yeah, SMU. It takes a lot to get used to with these different schools and different conferences. Heck, it's still taking me time to get used to the SEC, including Oklahoma and Texas. So I don't see this being the last time we see major changes to conferences. But it is really interesting the fact that, like you said, there are no undefeated teams in these on these lists, and I believe it. I think that is going to create a lot of conversation and debate about okay, you got a lot of teams that have 1 to 2 losses. How, if you're the playoff committee, how do you factor in who the best teams are and get it right? That's going to be the tough part of the job, because their job's been easy over the years with you have undefeated Alabama at number 1, and then you pick 3 other teams. Now you got to pick 12 teams, and if they all have a loss or 2, maybe even 3 if they're that good, it makes the whole thing a lot tougher for them.
And that's what's going to be fun following this entire season. Our guy Andy Staples of On3 has released his own version of bracketology that he will be doing throughout the season. And obviously that's something that we follow pretty much from the get-go in college basketball, starting in late November when Joe Lenardi puts out his first projections. We're tracking it week to week. And, he's the guru of it, because what he says typically ends up applying to the NCAA tournament, where, we were tracking all season long. Hey, Lenardi says South Carolina's going to be in at an 11 seed, a 9 seed, whatever it may be. And you're constantly keeping track of that. And when you had the 14 college football playoff, you didn't really have that to a degree because it was pretty easy to figure out. But now that you've expanded out to 12, you have 7 at-large spots. It's going to be very interesting to see who's going to be in, who's on the bubble, who's going to be out as the season progresses. And it's going to be something to definitely check in on week in and week out.
Yeah, like you said, it's going to be so tough to project who gets in, who gets out. Like, obviously you have the 4 power conferences with those champions getting in pretty much automatically, and then from there it's like, and then the group of 5 school. But from there it's gonna be a tight race, I think, and you're gonna have to also factor in, okay, what about the independent schools like Notre Dame? What if they go 10-2 or 11-1? Do you put them in? So they're like I said, the job of the committee becomes so much tougher, and it's like, not everyone's going to be happy. That's the thing. Even if you expand it, everyone's not going to be happy. Someone's going to get left out. And
Totally.
Yeah, that's the thing with it.
I applied the AP poll that came out the other day and what the college football playoff would look like based on those numbers. And like Missouri at 11 would get left out, because like Utah would have been the Big 12 champion. They were like 14th or something like that. So you're going to have teams that think they're safe based on where they're ranked, that realize like, oh crap, we just got left out, even though we're number 11 or number 12 or whatever it may be. So this is going to be very interesting to watch, because like you said, like when we went to 4 teams, the 5th team was angry. Now we're going to go to 12, and 13 and 14 are going to be angry. We go to 16, and 17 and 18 are going to be angry. There's never any way to satisfy everybody. I mean, we have a 68 team men's basketball tournament and women's basketball tournament. And guess what? 69 and 70 are angry that they got left out. Like, it's always going to be that way.
I just hope we don't keep leaving the door open for everyone to join. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
When does it end? I think 68 is a great number to be at right now. And yeah, I feel like at some point maybe they'll open it up to 72.
I hate to tell you, but 96 seems like it's on the horizon before too long.
No.
Buckle up, because that's coming.
Big thumbs down. And with the college football playoff, it's like, if you keep expanding it, it's going to go into the Super Bowl week eventually. And like
and here's the thing for me, like, we could expand the college football playoff to 90 teams. It's still going to be the same 5 to 6 teams every single year that are routinely probably going to be winning the national championship.
Well, that's what we think. But what if there's that one week where it is like college basketball, where there's a potential upset somewhere?
I like what you said there. Upset weeks. I want to dive into a topic coming up next known as Volcanic Saturday, because we talked earlier on this week about some crazy weeks on the schedule this year for college football. Which one might be the most chaotic? We'll dive into that coming up. Again, we are broadcasting live at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry. Going up until 10. Chris will hop in here with me for the 10 o'clock hour, as we're going to be out here going until noon for the 107.5 game Summer Golf Classic on your Friday, 8 days from kickoff here on the game. Tyler Head here. Always love telling you about our friends over at Twin Peaks, and with football season right around the corner, you definitely want to make sure you get yourself out to Twin Peaks so you can take in all the great action with all those TVs as far as the eye can see, including week 0 coming up tomorrow, which we'll be talking about here in just a minute. Time to take a break out of your game day and bring your jersey down to Twin Peaks and grab some 29-degree draft beers, hang out, watch it on those amazing TVs, grab some food as well, and have a fantastic time. Are you looking for a job? By the way, you can have a ton of fun and make great money at Twin Peaks, as that team is looking for you. They're looking for Twin Peaks girls, cooks, bussers, barbacks, and more. If you want to work for Twin Peaks, text WORK4TP. That is work the number 4TP to 85000. Again, WORK4TP to 85000, or for our friends at Twin Peaks down in the Vista. Welcome back in, Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central, hanging out with you on your Friday out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the annual 107.5 The Game Summer Golf Classic. Appreciate everybody that's checking us out, by the way, on the Game TV, sponsored by Shepherd Glass and powered by our friends at Integrated Media. You can also take and listen to us wherever you go with the 1075 Game app on the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store. So, Jack, we talked in that last segment about the potential chaos of the college football season this year. I am a religious listener of the Late Kick podcast by Josh Pate of 24/7 Sports at CBS, and he has something that he calls Volcanic Saturday, which is the 1 weekend a year where everything gets blown up. You have upsets, you have like playoff altering outcomes that completely shift how we think the postseason is going to go for college football. Now, in years past, again, you only had a 14 playoff where there's only a handful of teams that could be affected by something like this, especially as you get later into the season. Now we have a 12-team playoff where, again, Utah could be the 20th best team in the country, but leading the Big 12 standings, and a loss in week number 11 could drastically alter how we think the playoff's going to go. And maybe an unranked team might be in at that point from the Big 12. So there's a lot more possibility for these volcanic Saturdays to happen now that you've expanded the field out so much. And you and I were talking earlier on this week, this list that NCAA.com put out of the top 5 weeks of college football this year, a lot of options for chaos in these weeks.
It's really tough to pick one specific week where the most chaos can happen and it just messes everything up. I'll say we were talking a little earlier about Ohio State and Michigan, and what if Michigan's not particularly great this year and they go into Columbus and beat Ohio State to wreck their playoff hopes. I think week 14 rivalry week really has the potential to be one of those weeks where it's like maybe a lot of these teams, like right now, Ohio State's number 2, Michigan's number 9. I think by the end of the year, that's going to change. I think Ohio State will probably be in the mix, but Michigan might be on the outside looking in a little bit. So I think we're going to get a lot of those matchups where it's like you got one really good team versus a team that is having an okay year but not up to their standards. And then that 1 week, they go in and just beat that team, and it's like wrecking playoff hopes for some of those teams out there.
I'm envisioning a scenario in the last week of the season because I think the most hyped game of the entire year is Texas going to Texas A&M. Because that is a rivalry that's been dormant for over a decade because Texas A&M came to the SEC and, they both point fingers on who didn't want to play the game and who did. So you got that game coming back. Yes, Texas is a much more talented team than A&M, but Kyle Field is going to be a madhouse the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I don't care what the records are. A&M can win that game. No matter how good or bad Texas is, as Chris gives us his best. Was it the Yell Leaders?
The Yell Leaders.
Yeah.
The Colt there.
The Colt out in College Station.
Yeah.
But that is a game that I'm envisioning. Like Texas may go into that with maybe 1 or 2 losses in SEC play. Losing to A&M could cost him a chance to go to Atlanta. Easily.
Going into Kyle Field is as if it's not hard enough. Going in there for a game like that hasn't been around since 2011.
Yep.
It is going to be, quite frankly, insanity. And I cannot wait for it. Again, I've talked about it before. I think you have too. That is like a top 5 game I am looking forward to most this year. And I hope it's a good one. We got a lot of great games that weekend in general, but that one specifically, it's like that's upset territory waiting to happen.
I look to week number 11, which is November 9th, which I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, would be the first weekend after the first college football playoff rankings come out.
I think that sounds about right.
So we'll have the official bracketology of what the playoff would look like given the first set of rankings there. And you go into that weekend, you have Alabama at LSU, which is always a high-profile game. Georgia at Ole Miss, which is going to be a huge game in the SEC. Oklahoma going on the road to Missouri. Miami at Georgia Tech, which that's a sneaky one. I don't think Georgia Tech is going to be in the mix for the college football playoff, but much like last year where they had that chaotic victory over Miami when Mario Cristobal didn't want to run the ball, they could potentially become a spoiler for Miami by maybe knocking them out of playoff contention if they already have a couple losses at that point.
And keep in mind, there's 2 things to look at here. Miami is probably going to be pissed going into that game because of how it's their own fault.
I said they got to be mad at themselves. They did it to themselves.
It's their own fault because they decide not to run the ball with 30 seconds on the clock.
Listen, we've played Madden and college football video games our entire lives. When you have a lead in the last few minutes of the game, you sit on it. You don't run the ball.
Exactly. And it's just that's one thing where I think it's going to be something to keep an eye on. But also, this game's going to be at Georgia Tech this year. So I feel like
Listen,
let's
man,
see. We don't have a time. We don't have a time yet on that game. So
weird things happen out on the flats.
I don't know,
Weird
man.
things happen out on the flats. You never know.
Now, a few other games I wanted to point out from there that week: South Carolina at Vanderbilt. No, I'm just messing. Big game there. Now, but for real, Clemson at Virginia Tech.
Mhm.
I would be imagining that being a night game potentially.
Sure.
And we know Blacksburg's insane, Enter Sandman stuff. That's a game right there where it's like Virginia Tech, I think, is going to be much better this year than they were last year. That's their game to kind of get themselves back on the map, in my opinion, of like, hey, this can be a really great season. And you got other matchups like that too.
And for Clemson specifically, they haven't changed a whole lot from last year. Again, they don't play with the transfer portal. They lost, one of their top receivers in Bo Collins to Notre Dame, brought in a couple of true freshmen that they're very excited about. But for the most part, it's almost the exact same team from a year ago. Yes, you're going to have offseason development. Some guys are going to make improvements, but I don't know if they're suddenly going to become another 10 or 11 win team in the regular season. So their margin for error is very, very thin. And again, that's week number 11. So we're getting into the last month of the regular season. They go on the road to Blacksburg and they already have a loss or two. That could be a potential detrimental loss to them if they go in there and lose that game.
And here's the thing: you're already playing Georgia, loss. You're playing Florida State by that point, and NC State, potential losses.
Right.
Like if they're already at 2 to 3 losses, this is the one where it's like you go into Blacksburg,
sure,
and you play around, and you lose that game. It's like you're probably getting knocked out. But I mean, there's other games. I mean, Florida State is playing Notre Dame in South Bend. That's a great one. One other matchup, I think. I don't know how BYU is going to be this year. But I feel like BYU at Utah, isn't that a big rivalry?
It's the Holy War.
The Holy War.
Yep.
Yeah, so that is going to be a big one. And then
now they're conference opponents too.
Exactly. And Oklahoma at Missouri. I mean, there's a lot of great matchups that week, and it is a week that maybe is getting a little bit slept on, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it was ranked number 3 by NCAA.com in the best weeks of college football. By the way, that Florida State Notre Dame game, if I had to pick right now where I think College Game Day is going to go for week number 11, I think it's a pretty safe bet that's probably going to be on the docket. Notre Dame has a very easy schedule. They should still be somewhere in the top 12 at that point in time. Florida State could be undefeated at that point in time still, for all we know, if the team is as good as they were a season ago. And that one could have huge college football playoff implications because, remember, Notre Dame can't be in the top 4. Their best possible scenario is being the 5th team because they don't play in a conference, which I'm essentially they're going to have to be undefeated to be that or have one loss. And losing to Florida State may be a quality enough loss where they could still pull that off.
But it's at home, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And it's like if it's a close loss, like when Ohio State scored in the last second against Notre Dame last year.
Brian Day yelled at Lou Holtz for some
reason.
Oh,
man. If it's that type of loss, it's like, okay, like you're fine. But, yeah, you really do probably need to go a close loss or undefeated to, definitely be that fifth seed.
It is truly going to be a chaotic season. It all gets kicked off tomorrow, speaking of Florida State, as they'll be taking on Georgia Tech in the Aer Lingus Classic across the pond in Ireland. 12 noon kickoff on ESPN. We're going to talk some week 0 coming up next. So we've got full slate games coming up tomorrow to whet the appetite for next weekend's official start of college football. Diving into that to wrap up, our number 1 is The Extra Point. He's Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head, hanging out at the 107.5 The Game's Summer Golf Classic at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia, going until noon here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra point. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central hanging out here at Charwood Golf Club, West Columbia, 107.5 Game Summer Golf Classic. Everybody getting out there on the course. Saw Bill Gunner being chauffeured around on a golf cart a couple minutes ago. As he's getting all the highest quality treatment as he often does everywhere he goes, I guess.
Yeah, he definitely does. But hey, it's that 107.5 treatment. So.
That's right. Well, I filled in for him yesterday on the early game as he took his 300th vacation day of the year. So he lives the high life around here. That's for sure.
Yeah, I wish I could get that many vacation days, or anyone for that matter.
Well, we're getting set for college football to start tomorrow, week 0. Got 4 games on tap, headlined by the first one, Florida State and Georgia Tech out there in Dublin, Ireland, Aer Lingus Classic at Aviva Stadium. High noon on ESPN. College game daily, right up into it. This game is intriguing to me. Florida State obviously got screwed out of the playoff spot last year. I think we can all agree with that. Georgia Tech, a sneaky good team, right? Like, this is a team that nobody expected a lot of last year. Brent Key's first full year as a coach there, after they finally let go of that goofball and Jeff Collins, and now it's the time to see what kind of step forward they can make in this next year for Brent Key.
Yeah, this is a big year for both programs. Florida State obviously going to be playing with that chip on their shoulder of trying to prove people wrong and get to the playoff after getting, like you said, screwed out of the playoff last year. But we'll see how things look. New quarterback in Tallahassee, and then Georgia Tech. They're coming off a pretty, I think, they won like 7 games last year, so pretty solid season last year, and we'll see what happens. But I think getting off to a good start in week 1 really sets the foundation for what happens next, because it's like the rest of the month you have Georgia State, Syracuse, VMI, and then Louisville, and then Duke. So it's like you got a real chance to get off to a strong start if you can beat Florida State out of the gate.
And I know DJU is kind of the headliner, again, coming over from Oregon State, returning to the ACC to play quarterback for the Seminoles, but people may not also realize they got Roydale Williams at running back from Alabama, and he was kind of lost in the shuffle of all those great running backs that Bama had a season ago, but he did have 500 yards and 5 touchdowns for the Tide, in addition to Malik Benson, also from Alabama, who came in last year as a pretty highly touted guy out of the junior college ranks. Didn't have the greatest season last year at Alabama like people were expecting him to have, but coming in there to Florida State, probably expect to be one of their bigger pass catchers this year to help DJU out there on the offense.
Yeah, with Roydale Williams, I mean, you said he had 561 yards last year on the ground for 5 touchdowns, averaging 5 yards per run. So he's been at Alabama for years, but never really gotten the full-blown opportunity to where he's the guy. And I think at Florida State, a big part of this offense will definitely be the run game this year, because, I mean, DJU is a good quarterback, but there are times where he's definitely struggled in the past at Clemson and all that. But I think a big identity early in the year will be, okay, what can a guy like Roydale Williams do in the run game? And if they get the ball moving that way, it makes things so much easier for DJU in the pass game.
My question with DJU, and this goes back to his time at Clemson, because he was very underwhelming there, which is why he ended up transferring out to Oregon State. And his numbers look similar last year compared to what he did at Clemson the year before, but he looked better from an eye test standpoint, like he had improved in his mechanics and a lot of the nuances of the game. So I'm interested to see how he fares going back to the ACC, and how interesting that game against Clemson is going to be here when they finally face each other later on the season.
That game's going to be nuts later in the season. But I will say something that is standing out, because obviously I think DJU had a pretty good season last year. I think a big part of that is you look at the sack numbers. 2022, he gets sacked 22 times. Before that, he got sacked 19 times. You go back to last year with Oregon State, he only got sacked 11 times. So I think that made his job a lot easier in terms of, he's obviously throwing for more passing yards and stuff. All his numbers are up,
right?
Outside completion percentage. But for him, it's like, if you give him enough time protection, he can do good things, because he's a guy. I mean, he got benched going into the ACC title game 2 years ago when Cade Klubnik got the start.
Yep.
And you have to imagine, like, okay, this is a different quarterback by now. This is his last year of college. How's he going to do? And if he can really get off to a good start here and carry out the rest of the year, he's a guy that we're looking at maybe in the NFL draft being picked.
Oh, for sure. On the flip side of things, you have Georgia Tech, and look, as a graduated the University of Georgia. I do not like to give Georgia Tech any credit for anything at all, but this is a team that I think is flying under a lot of people's radar. I think Brent Key is a very good head coach. Look what they have on offense. Haynes King was one of the most underrated transfer quarterbacks last year, coming over from Texas A&M. 3,700 yards or 3,600 total yards, 37 total touchdowns last year. They have a 1,000-yard back in Jamal Haynes coming back. Like, this is a very efficient offense. Defensively struggling a little bit there, but we'll see what kind of development they can have and progression they can have going into this season. But this game could be a lot closer than the 10-point spread I believe that Florida State has as of right now. Like, this could be a down to the wire type of game.
Now, I did see something. Kirk Herbstreit was talking to someone yesterday on I saw it on Twitter. He was talking to the Florida State AD, and he was saying that apparently there's going to be about 25,000 Florida State fans there. So it definitely should be a pro FSU crowd, I guess, which definitely helps. But, I mean, Georgia Tech, they're not a bad team. And you talk about Haynes King. He's the guy that comes from SEC country at Texas A&M. And then transfers to Georgia Tech last year, has a pretty good year, and this is his 5th year now. I think he can definitely be a guy that puts it together. And I mean, look, what Georgia Tech does this year really starts with him. Obviously, they got to be better defensively, and they got to help out King around him in the offense. But everything they do starts with him for sure.
And for those that don't remember, the last time we saw Georgia Tech, they were taking Georgia down to the wire in rivalry for last year. Like, this is a team that can definitely jump up and surprise a lot of people.
Oh, totally. It would not surprise me in a loaded, or I should say, deeper ACC this year. They wouldn't surprise me if they end up being pretty good this year.
So looking forward to that. Again, that's going to be the headline. The rest of the day, you got New Mexico State hosting Montana State, Nevada hosting new member of the ACC and SMU, and our friends at Delaware State going to Hawaii after finally arriving. I believe everybody's finally made it out there to the island, so they should be good to go. I imagine they're probably going to be exhausted and jet lagged, so if you are a betting person, I know a 40.5-point favorite by Hawaii is a big number.
That's a huge number.
I might jump on that, to be honest with you.
I know I said like 2 days ago, definitely bet on it because I would. At 40.5, that's a huge spread to cover.
This team flew 10.5 hours after a delay, after missing their first flight, got to there in 3 different pieces as a team. You know they're going to be wiped. And then, by the way, this game is taking place at midnight, Eastern time. So this team's going to be playing into the early Sunday morning hours against a team that's made for this time zone. Like, this could get ugly.
This is a team that went 1-10 last year, and you look at their only FBS games from last year. They played Army 57-0, Miami, Ohio 62-20. I know that's last year, but man, honestly. 40.5 is a big spread, but we'll see.
I'm hopping on the Rainbow Warriors.
Rainbow Warriors. Let's go.
All right, Jack, appreciate it. We'll have you back in here starting next week as we'll finally be able to talk about games. Let's go. Again, we're broadcasting live at Charwood Golf Club, West Columbia, 107.5 Game Summer Golf Classic. Chris Clark going to jump in here with me in the next hour on the X Point here on your Friday on the Game. Tyler Head for our friends over at Twin Peaks. I'm looking at the forecast right now. Don't see too much rain in the very near future, but like we just had a couple weeks ago, you have those summer storms and tropical storms that do make their way through South Carolina. And if you have an open crawl space under your home and recently experienced a storm, you could have some standing water underneath your home, which can lead to a lot of complications like high humidity and condensation that can create things like mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites in that crawl space. Moisture can also lead to wood rot and floor joist problems as well. That must-do smells and awful odors can also lead to serious health issues for you and your family, like runny nose, itchy eyes, and coughs, because about half the air that you breathe in your home comes from that crawl space. Any issues with that crawl space, you need to check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists. Go online and schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. Again, go online and schedule an appointment today with our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists. Oh, he was great value, Johnny Manziel. 10 o'clock, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Broadcasting live out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Tyler Head now joined by the one and only Chris Clark, who
thank you.
Out there hitting some balls earlier this morning.
I hit one ball.
How far did it go?
It went about unofficial, of course, 175 to 200, and that is probably the second best shot I've ever hit.
Okay.
So I immediately gave
Got to end on top.
I gave the driver back to Josh Yellman, and then I came in.
Now,
I'm retiring.
Now, have you seen the golf gun that everybody's talking about?
No.
Terry was telling me about it. You can, instead of hitting a tee shot, you can just fire that thing off. That's my kind of golf.
Yeah. I did used to shoot a potato gun when I was a kid.
Right, they're in the same vein. I think
we're both country guys.
Exactly. I think long range golf shooting should become a thing. Like, forget the clubs. Let's just try and shoot it towards the hole. Like, that's my kind of sport.
Yeah, I might be half decent at that. The real golf,
because regular golf, like I'm okay at putt. Regular golf is not necessarily my forte, but sounds like I had a pretty good shot to start things off. Did you see Preston's opening tee shot?
No, I got here a little bit later. Was working on some stuff this morning, so I didn't get to come out for the grand introduction. But Preston, a lefty, right?
Yes. So I did not know this until we were out here last year, and he was doing his putting challenge. Yes. And I was like, how about that? Preston's a lefty. Did not know.
Did Preston do like the you know how they'll have like Jack Nicklaus come like tee off or whatever, like, and they announce him and everybody cheers? Did he do that for Preston?
I was in here, so I have no idea. I imagine,
he's the celebrity star.
Preston's kind of a low key guy, though. I imagine he doesn't need too much fanfare. Which, by the way, thrilling time yesterday when he joined us for the Gamecock Central takeover. That was such a blast.
Yeah, I was beside myself with joy. We got to do that more. It was like old times. You know, they took Preston from us.
They did, yeah.
They really did.
Well, because when I first started working here, he was in that like 9-10 to like noon slot. So you guys worked with him every single day. Then we, shuffled things around and put him in the mornings with Bill, and the rest is history, I guess.
The rest is history. Yes, it was a great time though. Did a little film review of some of Preston's old games in real time. So good times there. Which
it's so funny now because I know Wes was watching the game against Arkansas that Preston was in, that he was apparently getting manhandled by Jason Peters in that game. But I went back and was like skimming through like the 04 Georgia South Carolina game just to see like what Preston was doing in that game. And that was like Carolina was wearing the black jerseys in that one. Those numbers are so hard to read in that like pixely 2004 broadcast.
Which pixel was Preston?
I couldn't figure out which pixel was Preston.
Yeah. That was a heck of a game. Wes and I were talking about it. We were both there.
That was the who had was it pick six in that game?
Yeah, Coach Simpson had a pick six.
Yeah.
Troy Williamson had a long catch, like on a slant, like spun around somebody and outran everybody. And Carolina was up 16-0 at halftime and lost 20-16. So that was rough. But thinking about that game, man, it got me excited because we're 8 days away now.
8 days.
I was going to say 9. That was last night.
Well,
8 days away.
For those of us that believe in week 0, we're almost 24 hours away. We'll be watching College Game Day at this point tomorrow morning, which is glorious.
Yeah, it is glorious. I was thinking more in terms of South Carolina Day. Williams-Brice.
Sure.
We'll be there in just over a week, 4:15 in the afternoon. Going to be a blast. Can't wait for it.
Forecast right now calling for about 90 degrees. So going to be warm and start hydrating. Put sunscreen on now because you know the deal in Columbia in middle of the afternoon in August. We know what's up.
Yeah, it'll be hot. Shane Beamer updated, of course, on Carolina Calls last night.
He did.
The status of the team. I didn't hear anything in a couple things new.
Sure.
Obviously, I was going to say didn't hear anything incredibly new. We did get some news about a receiver who's defected from the program and an injury report, which I have some thoughts on as well.
Yeah, let's real quick here, Ed. Let's get to that injury report. This is going to be from yesterday's cut list. Let's see. I had it here. Number 7. Let's get number 7 from yesterday's list here. This is the injury report last night on Carolina Calls.
The beauty of it is the players always control the depth chart with how they play.
Not that one. That's Dell Logan. Hold on. Let's go cut number 7 from yesterday. Sorry about that, Ed, to switch it up on you. But yeah, cut number 7 from yesterday, the injury report from Shane Beamer last night on Carolina Calls. All right. We'll work to get back to that here in just a minute. But as far as injuries go, they did have a couple names on there that are worth talking about.
Yeah. So the two guys, excuse me, Beamer said they're in pretty good shape, which I would say is true. But there are two guys that he listed on the injury report. And let me give some context. Todd Ellis asked him about guys who were contributors or starters. So it's not list off anybody on the roster. Maybe redshirt freshmen who aren't going to play, etc. The question was framed up as, how are you doing with contributors, starters, guys who are going to play a lot? The two guys he listed are both on the offensive line. Now, not projected starters,
right?
But they were 6-year offensive tackle Ja'Kai Moore, and then transfer offensive lineman Aaron Parks, who's kind of been one of those reserve swing guys who can play tackle for you.
Sure.
So even though South Carolina's in a pretty good spot, assuming no more injuries between now and Saturday, assuming no more injuries on game day. Remember last year, he pointed this out.
Yep.
Nick Emanwari injured very early in that game.
Right.
Had to come out. Casey Henry injured on the first series against North Carolina at a position that was already a question. So here's where that leaves you. When you look at positions like the offensive line, you know that South Carolina has a little bit more depth there than last year. But it's always good to be able to keep your depth and not have to already dip into it at any point. Now you've already dipped into it a little bit. So I don't want to say everybody's sitting there sounding the alarm, but it looks like true freshman Josiah Thompson's going to start at left tackle. Beamer actually said that was probable last night.
Right.
Then you got Casey Henry back and healthy at right tackle. He does. I mean, only fair to say he does have an injury history.
He can just stay healthy.
If he can stay healthy. So behind them, you're looking at, you might have to move your favorite player, Tyler, Vashawn Lee. He played right tackle last year.
Right.
He could do that. Then you'd have to move somebody else to center. Tree Babalade could play there. Tree Babalade played left tackle last year. But you've got two guys who were probably two of your three top reserves at offensive tackle are now down right now and may be out. He said mid-season was optimistic for Parks.
Yep.
And Ja'Kai Moore, they don't really know. Sounded like it could end up being a longer-term thing. We don't really know. He said they'll know soon. So, to me, Tyler, a little bit of a concern there.
Yeah, you just hope this is not the snowball rolling in the direction that it did a season ago, where that went all the way back to the spring of last year. We lost Jalen Nichols in the spring game, and that he was obviously going to be one of your starters, and then it kind of went from there. And Casey Henry gets hurt 4 plays into the game against North Carolina, and injury after injury, to where again we didn't have a cohesive starting five until the Vanderbilt game all the way at the end of the season. So hopefully that's not the case. Again, there's a lot of reason to be excited about this offensive line. Josiah Thompson, again, projected to be the starting left tackle. Vashawn Lee at center, again, guy that's been around, played a lot of football up to this point. Casey Henry, if he can stay healthy. Torselli Simpkins projected to be at one of those guard spots as well. So you like what you have, but again, you are starting to get a little concerned that if you have to dip into that second level, you might run into some problems there.
Yeah, that's, again, don't want to dip into the depth. It's like the same thing like at linebacker, right? We've seen in the past, you look at South Carolina's linebacker position. I remember, what was that, 2021 season, I think it was. You kind of had 3 guys there. You felt like you had 2 starters and a reserve that could play a whole bunch for you. Then what ends up happening, Sherrod Green goes down with an injury, and now you're down. Now you're bringing Damani Staley up to starter, and you don't have proven guys back behind them. Now, this season, if you look at linebacker, even if you had an injury, you don't want it. You're in a better position to weather that storm. When you look at the offensive line last season, the amount of injuries were ridiculous. Some of the guys didn't end up factoring in as much. Like you had a couple or a few walk-ons that ended up missing substantial time. They probably weren't going to play a lot.
Right.
But you had a bunch of guys that were even Nick Gargiulo, who didn't end up having to go on the bench due to injury. He played hurt.
Right.
A lot of the season. Credit to him. And so now you're looking at a situation where, you've got some depth built up on the offensive line. The picture on paper looks better going into this season at that spot. But you now have guys, who are on the shelf for a little bit on the first game. And so now you start thinking about it of, okay, what if somebody does roll an ankle?
Sure.
AJ Parks rolled an ankle in practice or at the scrimmage. That's why he's going to be out until maybe midseason, optimistically, according to Beamer. What if that happens, on the first series against ODU?
Sure.
Now you're dipping down into your second, third unit, and you've dipped into that depth.
Well, I go back to the Twitter poll that we ran a couple of days ago, and Wes and I believe talked about this yesterday to lead off the Garnet Trust Hour. But we asked our audience, what is the most important factor for you in South Carolina having a much more successful season? And the the options included healthy offensive line, Lenore Sellers having a breakout year, elevated defense, and emergence in the wide receiver room. Offensive line won by a wide margin of 68% of that vote. So, and again, we've talked about this ad nauseum for what happened last year. Everybody understands that, and again, I brought this point yesterday. You can have a NFL caliber quarterback in Spencer Rattler. You can have a first round talent at wide receiver in Xavier Legette. If that offensive line is not where it needs to be, and it takes your running game completely out of it, you're not going to be that successful on offense.
Yeah, it was a huge issue. I mean, because it caused several problems. Number one, you didn't have balance. And what I mean by that, some people think of balance as you're running the ball 50% of the time, passing it. No, balance is more about, can you do either one of those things in given situations? Can you run the football on early downs? Can you mix things up situationally is more of what balance is about. Can you be multiple on offense? And Carolina really couldn't do that. I mean, Spencer Rattler, to his credit, still had a really good year. So did Xavier Legette, even given the issues, poor pass protection, not much of a run game at all to speak of. So credit to those guys for that. But South Carolina was very, very one-dimensional last season. They got into, Tyler, you always have the stat. What were they? 3rd and 8.
That was their average
in SEC play.
SEC opponents,
which is just not sustainable, right? So you get into that, you can't run the football in short yardage when you get in those, the rare occasions you do get in 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2.
Right.
You can't run the ball in early downs, which causes those late big downs and distances that aren't manageable. So, having an offense, yes, you've got some things that look better in terms of your running back personnel, a very mobile quarterback, probably a different philosophy offensively, but you still have to be able to stay healthy and execute those things up front.
We'll dive into more of what the coordinators had to say the other day because Preston distracted us yesterday as we dove into the fraudulent tackling numbers of Jason Henderson from Old Dominion. So we'll get into what the coordinators had to say the other day in reference to this South Carolina team as we roll on out here at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. A reminder, by the way, Love Chevrolet High School Football Show makes its return tonight. Justin Hall and Elijah Campbell debuting a new season running from 7 to 11 p.m. tonight as they take in all the action of high school football going on here in the Columbia area and setting sail for what is going to be a fun season of high school football. Again, 7 to 11 tonight right here on the game, the Love Chevrolet High School Football Show. Tyler Head, Chris Clark. We're broadcasting live at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 Game Summer Golf Classic going up until noon here on the game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Chris Clark, hanging out with you on your Friday. Charwood Golf Club, West Columbia for the 107.5 The Game. Summer Golf Classic going to be out here until noon this morning. Want to dive into a little bit more of what Clayton White and Dow Loggins had to say the other day when speaking to the media. And again, we'll hear from them each and every week as the season goes along, including Coach Beamer in his usual Tuesday presser, as well as Carolina Calls, which we had last night where we got that injury report from a few minutes ago. I want to start off with this from Dow Loggins the other day because, of course, so much focus is on Lenora Sellers, who's now officially the starting quarterback after we've gone through the charade of the offseason, pretending like he maybe wasn't going to win the job or something like that. But Dow Loggins gave a very interesting answer on Wednesday when asked the question on if Lenora Sellers ever gets flustered and how he handles that. Here's what Dow Loggins had to say.
Oh, yeah. Y'all should come to the QB room like that. I threw him out of practice multiple times. Like, it's the intensity that these guys get coached with at that position is probably different than what they've experienced. And, you know, it was easy for Spence and it was easy for Lenore's, to watch Spence and do this. But we played Mississippi State last year, and Spencer, I don't know what he was. He had like 3, 4, 5 incompletions for the game and throws the ball, whatever it was, 40, 50 times. And then we go to Sunday practice and we give the young guys 2 minutes. He throws an interception, and I mean, rip his head off about like, hey, Rattler just threw the ball 50 times in a game and didn't turn it over once. And you get one throw in the first throw, you throw a pick. But you got to battlefield hard in these guys. So when they get in these big stadiums, these arenas in the SEC, that they're ready to handle the burden, because it's a heavy burden to wear the crown of being the quarterback in the SEC. Outside that, being the head coach and then the quarterback, obviously, like they take it just takes a lot, and it takes mental toughness, and you're gonna have to go through it. So that's the way we coach him. So yes, I've seen him flustered. He bounces back extremely fast, and he is resilient that way, and he perseveres the right way, and he can take one mistake, and normally he doesn't make the same mistake twice. And that's probably what helps him. Also, the question earlier, like what's helped give us confidence to be able to put him in that spot with being a redshirt freshman, because the backups played a lot in the SEC and done some really good things. You go turn on that Alabama game like 2 years ago, and Robbie's electric. But the ability to we know there's going to be lumps, and we know he's going to take some of those things on the chin, but I have a ton of faith in him to continue to make new mistakes and continue to get better. And he is ready from that part of it mentally. And he got to play a little bit last year. You know, he goes to the Furman, plays a little bit of Furman, got to play a little package of Kentucky, and then plays against Vanderbilt. So he's played in these venues a little bit, but it's what an awesome opportunity for a young guy and to get to do it at a really early age.
By the way, Rattler was 18 of 20 for 288 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game against Mississippi State. 90% completions in that game. And yeah, I could see Lenore Sellers getting dogged the next day for missing a throw in practice. But again, from everything that we've heard about Sellers, everything that we know about him up to this point, smart kid, good head on his shoulders, doesn't seem to be too high or too low on things. So it seems like he's going to be able to handle the highs and lows playing quarterback. Now, that being said, he's going to make mistakes. There's going to be problems. There's going to be issues as the season rolls along. That's just a part of football. But it doesn't seem like there's anything that's going to rattle him too much.
Well, and look, there are going to be mistakes from experienced players, even when you play the schedule South Carolina does, the competition that they do, but especially with redshirt freshmen who have never been in that chair, so to speak. They've never been in that position. They're going to make mistakes. And so what you want to hear is exactly, I think, what Logan said, is that in the situations, as much as they've been able to simulate those types of situations, not really possible in practice, not even possible in a scrimmage when you're, playing in the stadium. You just have to go out and do it in games. But you want to hear that he bounces back very fast, that he's kind of unflappable. That, the mental aspect, plus not making the same mistake twice, which Logan's also alluded to. So I don't want anybody to take that in a literal sense.
Sure.
Well, you said he threw a pick. You said he would never do that again. That's, just meaning certain types of mistakes when you kind of really dial in on a micro level to what the mistake is. He's not doing that over and over. And we know that Sellers is a super sharp guy. We know how even keel it is. That combined we say it often. That combined with his immense physical tools that's why everybody's so excited about him.
And look, the schedule's tough. We know that. But he's legitimately going to be facing some of the best defenses in all of college football. Alabama goes without saying. Ole Miss loaded up in the transfer portal. Oklahoma under Brent Venables always going to be a solid defense. Clemson the same way. Like, he's going to be tested by some of the best defensive players in all the entire nation this upcoming year. And like you said, he's going to make mistakes. There's going to be interceptions. There's probably going to be a fumble or two here and there. How do you respond to that? How do you come back the next drive and make it better and correct your mistakes? It's going to be the big key to seeing how successful he's going to be this year.
Yeah, it is. There's no doubt. And look, one of the big questions, and you alluded to it in the poll there, Lenore Sellers and how he plays, it's a huge key to this season. And it's kind of, in some ways, it's a little bit unfair to put that much on a first-year starter at quarterback, but it is the reality of the situation that how well he plays really dictates the type of season that South Carolina can have. And so it's up to him, but, it's also up to his teammates. I think that's getting lost just a little bit in this is there's a lot of focus on quarterback and Sellers, but I think people are very much tuned into the idea of, hey, the offensive line has got to get a lot better. I'm not one of those people matter who the other players are or what they do. It's all about the O-line. No, it's really, to me, it's all about everything working together.
Right.
You have a revamped running back room. You have, you'll probably be better on the O-line by default, but how much better? What type of leap can you make? What the receiver position, which for my money is still the biggest question mark, certainly on the offense, probably on the entire team,
right,
is the wide receiver position. What does that look like when the season starts?
Sure.
So all those things have to work in conjunction and have to help out Sellers. The good news is when you have a guy like Lenoris, when other things break down, remember, the game of football, it's one reason we love it. It only takes one thing going wrong on a given play to wreck the entire play.
Sure.
You can run the best routes. You can have a clean pocket from 4 or 5, if you got a tight end block, like everybody can be doing their job but one player.
Yeah.
And that wrecks the entire play. So the good news about Sellers and his skill set and his abilities, he can make you right when a lot of things go wrong. So how much help can he get from the rest of his teammates to where it makes it a little bit easier on him, particularly in year one? I think the run game is a huge part of that. But can they find some reliable receivers? Can they be better in pass protection on the offensive line? These are questions that kind of determine how good can he be.
By the way, you mentioned the wide receivers. How many oars are we predicting on the depth chart come Monday when it comes to receiver spot?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have seen years where it's been all of them.
Yeah.
I think, what in 2022, didn't they have oars at all 3 spots? I need to go back and look at that.
Yeah,
but
I think so.
I would not be shocked if it was that. I'll be honest, though. I would not be shocked if they're just like, hey, Mazio Bennett's a starter. This guy's a starter, and then some oars behind him. But we've seen all 3 before.
And with wide receivers, you're going to have a lot of guys rotating in. So the 3 that you name as starters aren't going to be the only 3 on the field. You're going to have an opportunity to get a lot of guys on the field. Again, if things go the right way against a team like Old Dominion, you should be able to go deep into your depth chart as the game goes along, get everybody out there, get some reps, and really figure out what you have before you go on the road to Kentucky in week number 2.
I'm trying to go back and look to see if I can find the depth chart from last season. Okay, here we go. Yep, so going into the Georgia State game, this is not last year's, 2 years ago, but this is the one I referenced. 2 years ago, Juice Wells going into year 1, obviously, as a transfer. You had Xavier Leggett or Juice Wells. You had Amarian Brown or DeCarrion Joyner, who was still a receiver at that time.
Yep.
And then you had Josh Vann or Jalen Brooks. So you literally had all 3 in 2022 spots being oars. And so I think what it ended up being was I can't remember who started game 1. I honestly can't even remember who started, but they had all 6 of those guys that I mentioned ended up playing a good bit that season.
Absolutely. Again, that was a little bit of sound from Dow Loggins there in reference to Lenore Sellers. Again, we're broadcasting live here out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Appreciate everybody that is watching us on the Game TV, powered by Integrated Media and sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass. Earlier on this week on Twitter, you posed an interesting question to Gamecock fans in reference to 2 cold predictions for this upcoming season. We'll dive into that coming up next, give some of our thoughts, and see what other people had to say in reference to that as we are getting closer to football, 8 days away from Carolina and Old Dominion. the 107.5 The Game Summer Golf Classic, Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Tyler and Chris going until noon here on The Game. Welcome back in. Tyler Head, Chris Clark, extra point on your Friday at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the annual 1075th game Summer Golf Classic. I'm sure Bill's out there having a good time on a hole somewhere. I saw him being chauffeured around earlier on a golf cart. So
of course.
He's getting the top level treatment. Hopefully Preston's found that golf gun that I've been talking about. Yeah, that's my way to play golf. You just shoot a golf ball out of a giant gun looking thing. That's better than a tee shot for me. So if they can find that for me, I'd love to shoot that thing off later. I mentioned this for the break. You posed a question on Twitter earlier on in the week. Got a lot of responses of varying degrees of 2 predictions for South Carolina this year. And they don't have to be bold. They don't have to be crazy, but just 2 in general predictions. And as expected, you got a lot of people that responded to this the other day.
Yeah, it got a lot of responses, and some of them unserious, some of them serious. But, the ones that were honestly a mix of both of those, like humorous plus you're like, yeah, that's actually true.
Right.
They will win some games and lose some games. But I, a lot of people said this was actually a really common one, Tyler, which was interesting. They'll win a game that they're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very common one. And you start thinking about it. I was talking to somebody about this last night who covers another team that's on South Carolina's schedule this year, a team that has a lot of expectations. And they pointed out, like, look, we might be overvaluing a couple teams in the SEC.
Sure.
It's going to come down to, for a lot of teams that aren't maybe in the top 1 to 2 to 3 of the conference, it's going to come down to a few plays for those teams too.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think about the home games. South Carolina's got, 7 home games this year.
Yep.
That's when you play the schedule they do, that is where you really need to make your progress, right?
Sure.
That's where you really need to, okay, let's make sure that as much as we can, let's hold serve at home. But then you start breaking it down and you look at, okay, well, who's on the schedule at home? You obviously have some of the more manageable contests on your schedule, but you also look at it and say, okay, you got a couple, top 10? Where's Ole Miss and Missouri? Both in the top 10?
Yep.
You got 2 top 10 teams coming to Williams-Brice. And so you can look at it 2 ways. You can go, whew, those are going to be tough, which they are. Or you can look at it as this person put it to me last night. They got to go to Williams-Brice and play.
That's true.
And that's not exactly an easy place to play. So, I think a lot of fans are looking at it recognizing, yes, you have a difficult schedule. You get some of those at home. That's where you need to make the most progress. But what kind of upset can you spring? Can you go get one of those October road games?
Yep.
Can you get a Bama or an Oklahoma? Certainly, if we're sitting here on August 23rd, you're not favored in either of those games right now.
Sure.
You probably aren't going to be favored even if the first half of the season goes quite well for you.
Right.
But, can you go get one of those games? So it was interesting to me in looking at the poll results that I took. Very unscientific, obviously, but
sure,
a lot of Gamecock fans are predicting, hey, they're going to go get one of these games that they're not favored in.
That is one of the predictions that I came up with in thinking about this question. I pose it as they will beat at least one former SEC West team. So you've got LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, and then A&M, of course, as your crossover rivalry game that you've been playing for over a decade now. But, those are all 4 tough games. Those are all teams as of right now in the top 25 in the preseason AP poll. So, yes, technically South Carolina will probably be the underdog in all 4 of those contests. When you're kind of putting them in order of easiest ones to win, you might put A&M towards the top of that list, LSU, and then, again, Ole Miss and Alabama definitely going to be the 2 toughest there. But I don't think it's outside the realm of the possibility that Carolina could certainly maybe beat an LSU or an A&M this season.
Yeah, quote unquote easiest.
Sure.
And then it's A&M.
And they're 20th and, still have a ton of talent from when Elko was there as the DC and, help bring in that great recruiting class, have one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the SEC and Connor Wakeman. So not going to be easy by any means, but that's my prediction of beating at least one former SEC West team.
Yeah, that's a good. Did you have another one?
I did.
So one former SEC West team.
One former SEC West team. I think both Sellers and Rocket Sanders will get double-digit touchdowns on the ground this year.
Both Sellers and
Rocket
Sanders have double-digit rushing touchdowns.
With how prevalent the running game is going to be, Rocket Sanders had 10 touchdowns in his breakout season at Arkansas a couple years ago. Obviously, Sellers going to be a running type of quarterback. And again, I just think that these guys are both going to be able to find the end zone quite a bit, assuming the offensive line's better. I think both of them can get double digits.
Let's look at what KJ Jefferson. Oh, don't look.
Okay.
KJ Jefferson 2022. Not the same player, right?
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
expect to see some. You said Sanders had
Yeah,
literally
10.
10.
Exactly 10.
How many do you think Rocket had?
You mean KJ?
KJ. Yeah.
8.
He had 9.
9. Right there at it.
You almost got there.
So I think
I like that prediction.
I think these guys can both combine for double digits on the ground.
I like that. There were a lot of run game related predictions. Some of them had. Tell me what you think of this. Here's one that I saw more than once. Gamecocks getting to the top 25 rushing nationally.
Considering where this unit has been in the 3 years that Beamer's been here, that would be quite an accomplishment. Because running game has been towards the bottom of the barrel in the SEC and college football in general in these past 3 seasons. That'd be a sizable jump. I mean, again, with how heavy we expect the run game to be in this offense, I don't know if I'd say top 25, but maybe top 50 for sure.
Let's look at last year. So in the top 25, oh, this is funny. You know who the number 25 team in the rushing yards per game last season was?
No clue.
Georgia State.
Really?
How about that? Fighting Sean Elliott's 188 yards per game. And where was South Carolina at? I think
they were at 80
yards a game.
I think they were 86. So I think it's like 106th in the nation or somewhere pretty low like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if South Carolina doubles that total, which normally if you go into a season, say they're going to double the rushing total, you go, that's preposterous.
Sure.
But when you're at that number, you double it, you are in the 50s, 60s, 70s, like depending, because the numbers are small. You're a decimal point away in a lot of teams. But yeah, top 25, just for reference, you would be creeping up closer to 200 yards a game.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big ask to me. I'll tell you another, although I do think I could sit here, I would make a quote unquote bold prediction that they double that total. I think that's very possible because, again, if you do that, you probably end up middle of the pack in the country, middle of the pack in the SEC. I think that's doable.
Sure.
And that's something that I honestly think they must do if they're going to find more success. Another popular one, Tyler, Gamecock fans do seem to be pretty high on this defense.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious about that because on paper, there's some expectations to improve. I kind of was curious about the pulse of people saying, I don't believe that at all. Show me. I think what Carolina did in November last year and how they closed things out when they implemented the 3-2-5, put Bam Martin Scott on the field more. I think having some evidence of that improvement last year and then knowing you can carry that over when you've added a couple pieces, I think that's made people, even while going, yeah, they got to go do it against a hard schedule, some really good offenses. I think people are coming around to that idea. A lot of people thought that Carolina's a top 25 scoring defensive unit. And
sure.
Yeah, you look at it, they're going to play some really good offenses. You got Lane Kiffin coming to town, all that NFL talent they have. You got Missouri coming to town. They should be really good on offense. Oklahoma at Oklahoma. Bama with Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer. I mean, you got a lot of good this could be a much improved defense that still gives up a decent amount of points.
Sure.
Right? Because when you play these types of teams, you're going to give up some points.
Yeah.
You're not going to go out and, we're going to hold them to 13 points. That's not feasible in today's college football game against these high-powered offenses. But can they be top 25? I mean, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
No, not at all. And again, any kind of sizable jump from where they were a season ago is going to be welcome, considering the fact that they were, again, in most statistical categories at the bottom of the SEC. Last season, of course, month of November was better once they did implement that 3-5, and hopefully that carries over into more success this upcoming season. Quickly want to remind everyone, Sips and Sounds, the only craft beer, wine, and spirits tasting event held indoors under the cool AC with no rain, no heat, no worries, is coming to Columbia Saturday, September the 28th. Unlimited sampling of over 40 brands of local and national craft beers, wines, seltzers, and spirits. Going to have a live performances by Ken and Drew of Sister Hazel, Days, and the Donovan Twins. Again, all coming on Saturday, September the 28th. Get your unlimited tasting wristbands now at sipsandsoundscola.com. Again, that's at sipsandsoundscola.com for the event coming up on Saturday, September the 28th. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 2 of the Extra Point. since Wes doesn't believe in week 0, Chris and I are going to make some picks against the spread for the games coming up tomorrow. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Chris Clark, along with you on your Friday. Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia here in the game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head, Chris Clark, along with you here on your Friday on the game. Again, out at our 107.5 Game Summer Golf Classic at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Of course, tomorrow is the official start of college football. Week 0 games going on all afternoon long. Our guy Wes doesn't believe in Week 0, so I can't talk about that with him in the next hour. So, Chris, while you're here, we're going to talk some Week 0 games. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
So we have 4 games on the docket tomorrow, headlined by Florida State and Georgia Tech. Kicking things off at noon, you got Montana State going to New Mexico, SMU taking on Nevada, and then Delaware State playing the late game out at Hawaii. Make some picks against the spread because these numbers are very interesting. Florida State taking on Georgia Tech in Ireland, Aer Lingus Classic tomorrow at noon on ESPN. Florida State, obviously a top 10 team in the country, screwed out of a playoff chance a season ago. I think we can all agree on that. But as I was talking about with Jack in the last hour, this is a sneaky Georgia Tech team. I mentioned last time we saw them, they were taking Georgia to the limit in their rivalry game at the end of last season. Haynes King, one of the more overlooked transfer quarterbacks last year, 3,700 yards, 37 total touchdowns last year. They got 1,000 yards back in Jamal Haynes coming back this year. Defense does need some work, but they're a team that I think could make things interesting against Florida State tomorrow.
What's the spread?
10
for FSU.
Yes.
Did you see Pete Thamel said that FSU had the best defensive line in the country?
I lost a couple guys from last year.
Yeah, that was interesting. Are we picking against the spread?
Yes, against the spread. Do you think Florida State covers the 10? No.
What you got?
Yeah, especially for a first game, breaking in a new quarterback, got a lot of new guys coming out of the transfer portal. I think it has the capability to be kind of clunky for Florida State. I think they'll still win, but it could be a little closer, a little too close for comfort.
Yeah, I can see it being 10. I'm not going over 10 though.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, so we'll both take Georgia Tech to cover the 10 coming up tomorrow. Montana State is actually favored against New Mexico State, against New Mexico, despite the fact that Montana State is an FCS team. They were in the playoffs last year, lost an overtime game, North Dakota State in the first round. New Mexico is only 2-4 against the spread in their last 6 games against FCS opponents. They've won those games straight up, but only 2-4 against the spread. And again, Montana State is favored outright in this contest.
Sure.
13.5, by the way.
New Mexico, not New Mexico State.
New Mexico, not New Mexico State. Most New Mexico State's team plays for Vanderbilt now.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
They took a bunch of
them? Like 3 transfers from Mexico State.
We like that guy.
Like Diego Pavia is supposed to be their quarterback this year.
I am going to take New Mexico because they have Bronco Mendenhall. I'm a believer.
First season, right?
First season. He'll fix that around, that spread. He probably came in and said, "We're what against the spread against FCS teams? No, we're good. We're going to change that."
I will. I'll go with the Grizzlies of Montana, or excuse me, not the Bobcats of Montana State.
Yeah, wrong.
It's the Montana Grizzlies of Montana State Bobcats. I don't want to upset people out there from the Brawl of the Wild, which, by the way, is the best name in all the rivalries, in my opinion. So I got Montana State to cover 13.5. Chris will take New Mexico to beat that number there. SMU, a 25-point favorite on the road at a very bad Nevada team. We've talked about Nevada plenty because of Dale Von Campbell transferring over. They lose their top receiver in Dale Von Campbell. They have most of the same pieces back from their offense a season ago. It's tough to say they're going to put up much of a fight.
I got SMU.
Got SMU.
That's a big margin, but
that is. Now, last season, they were 4-1 against the spread when favored by 20 or more points. And the one game that they didn't beat that, they were favored by 20 and beat them by 18. So they're very good at gapping opponents. And Nevada is 1-6 against the spread in their past 7 games as a home dog. So I think this does favor the new ACC team in SMU.
Them and Stanford.
And Cal as well.
Yeah.
Can't forget about Cal.
Super weird.
Last one. And the story of this game has been hilarious because Delaware State missed their flight on like Tuesday. They had to fly to Hawaii 3 separate planes. So the team was broken up into 3 separate pieces. They got to be jet lagged. It's a 10.5-hour flight. They're playing this game essentially at midnight Sunday morning for an East Coast team. They're only getting paid $180,000 to be here, by the way, which I don't think it's worth it. Hawaii's favored by 40 points.
You know, I do hate to pile on. Didn't Delaware State play Missouri, I think, when Drew Lock was at Missouri I think Drew Lock had like 700 yards in that game.
Wouldn't surprise me.
This was obviously not even the same team. I hate when people do that. We were talking about that yesterday. 10 years ago, this team did this. But I went to Delaware State's website, their like official athletic department site, to try to find out more about their football team. And this picture, y'all can't see. Look at this picture, Tyler. This just looks
like a high school team.
Is this at Hawaii? Yeah.
Because they got the field paint.
So that's on the field at Hawaii, and it just looks like there's like 30 guys on the team.
Yeah,
I assume there's more than that, but yeah, just rough stuff here. The thing about Hawaii, I have no idea. I would have to pull out the trusty like Phil Steele to like see what they're projected to be, because I honestly have no idea.
Right.
Last year they were 5-8, led by Timmy Chang.
Timmy Chang, the legend.
But 40 points is a lot.
That's a big one.
Give me some more stats. Do you have it like? Do you have some against the spread stuff?
Not that we have time for. We have about 40 seconds.
I'll take Hawaii.
I'll take Hawaii to cover as well. By the way, Drew Lock against Delaware State in 2016, 402 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a 79-0 victory.
Yeah. I remember talking to one of my buddies who covers Missouri, and he was like, that was the worst football team I've ever seen in my life.
We'll see if they can fare better against the Rainbow Warriors, but we'll both take them to cover the 40-point spread. 2 hours down, 1 more hour to go. Wes Mitchell going to jump in here with me next. The Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here at Charwood Golf Club, West Columbia, going until noon here on the game. 11 o'clock on your Friday morning. Welcome in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell now joining me for the next hour as we go up until noon here on the game at our 107.5 game annual Summer Golf Classic at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Did you get a chance to hit anything before you came on the air with us here, Wes?
I just hit Josh.
Just hit Josh. Okay, that's fair enough. How far did you hit him?
A couple of yards. How about that?
That's pretty decent.
Yeah.
Do you deserve it?
Always. He's okay though. He's all right.
That's for making Terry's sandwich extra special at Firehouse the other day. How was that, by the way, Terry? Good.
Brownie was stupid.
2 thumbs up.
That brownie. I've been talking about that brownie since then. It was that good.
Your wife is tired of hearing about it.
Now she wants to try it, so I gotta take her to Firehouse so she can try it. So that might be on the docket for the weekend. But again, excited to be out here as always. Thank everybody here at Charwood Golf Club for allowing us to be out here once again. As you know, this is kind of the mark that football is officially here. We're 8 days away from South Carolina taking on Old Dominion. Of course, we got week 0 tomorrow, even though Wes isn't a part of that. Week 0 denier over here. But the rest of us will be able to enjoy some football on TV.
Am I allowed to watch any of it?
No, you're not.
Talked so much.
You have been so negative on week 0 this entire time.
So I can't sneak.
You better stay outside the entire day tomorrow. I don't want you to turn the TV on for 1 second.
I can turn the TV on. I can just watch something different. I can watch something else.
You've been a hater up to this point. I don't want you watching game day. I don't want you to watch the week 0 games until you can get on board with being a week 0 truther like the rest of us.
Okay. All right. You seem very fired up about this. So.
Well, you're the one that's been raining on everybody's parade when we talk about it. So I'm just reciprocating it back to you.
I'm just saying it's not real.
Do the games count? Do these games count towards the overall standings?
Those teams involved? I mean,
Florida State.
By the way,
hey, listen, SMU could surprise some people in the ACC this year. I'm just saying.
They're in the ACC?
They're in the ACC, along with Cal and Stanford. I know, we got to get used to it. All the people in Dallas are flocking their TVs to watch the ACC network now.
I mean, here's the thing. I can't get excited because it doesn't feel like week 1 has all these marquee matchups.
Sure.
To get you ready as a college football fan who has waited all year long for it to return.
Yeah.
And week 0 is like, hey.
It's the appetizer.
Here. Yeah, but it's a bad appetizer for a prime steak.
What about like when Florida and Miami played a couple years ago? Was that more serviceable?
Okay. That's cool.
So you need like a marquee matchup.
Yes,
to get you excited.
You know there is talk about moving the regular season to this week. Well,
the NFL is probably going to go to 18 games in the very near future, so that seems like a very logical possibility.
Like this would be week 1. Like it's not just there's going to be a handful of games. It would be all the marquee games, all the big games. Boom, we're starting right now.
Right.
And the college football season goes so late now with the expanded playoff that you would essentially just kind of move things up a little bit, which I think probably has some merit, honestly. And we'll see what the NFL does. Those two are always trying to avoid each other.
Sure.
It seems like they don't want to be on at the same time, which certainly makes sense. And, it does kind of stink, in my opinion, the NFL sort of stole Thursdays from college football.
You used to have some fun Thursday night games.
There would be some, not every week was like this, but there were some good Thursdays, man. And so the NFL has stolen that. But I do think for the most part, those two try to avoid each other with good reason.
Absolutely. So again, week 0 starting tomorrow, then 8 days away from Carolina and Old Dominion, coming up next Saturday at Williams-Brice Stadium. Last night, Carolina Calls made its debut for the fall with Coach Beamer, talking about everything that's gone on this entire offseason. One thing in particular that he talked about was freshmen on this team. And look, a mark of a Shane Beamer team is playing a lot of freshmen, whether they want to or not. Sometimes it's circumstantial. Sometimes it's guys just being so good, you do have to put them out there on the field. Let's go with cut number 10 from today's list here, Ed. This is Shane Beamer last night talking about the freshmen and the impact they're going to have on this team.
Like our freshman class, when people do recruiting rankings, they got the last 2 years of recruiting here for us correct. I mean, it's the last 2 years ranking-wise has been the 2 best years in recruiting that we've had here since 2012 or 13 by ranking, and there's no question about it. We started 5 true freshmen last year. A lot of them played and this year will be no different as well. If you look around at every single position that we have outside of quarterback and outside of defensive tackle, you're going to see a true freshman playing. You'll see a true freshman at DB, at linebacker, at defensive end, at tight end, offensive line, running back, and wide receiver. And potentially an area in special teams also. So we like the group. They're freshmen. We're going to have to live with some growing pains early on, but they're great young men, good players, and have big futures here at Carolina.
So the biggest takeaway of that, and he named a lot of position groups. We'll get to some of those individual ones in a moment, but it does seem to indicate that Josiah Thompson is indeed going to be your starting left tackle for this offensive line, which, as we've talked about plenty of times, last year when you had like Tree and Tro having to go out there and start, it was circumstantial because you had so many injuries. If Josiah Thompson is your best option at left tackle, put him out there and see what happens.
Yeah, so be it. And I don't think at this point anybody that's listened to us, I don't think it's a surprise at all. Like we pretty much got to the point that we were projecting this to be the case. And, some of these position battles are kind of going down to the end, down to the wire. This one really, could something change in 8 days? I guess you always leave room for that possibility. But this one appears to, in my opinion, kind of be locked in. And so it is headed that way. Josiah was taking first-team reps at left tackle day one of practice. And, now here we are as they get through their kind of walkthrough of this mock game week within just one final week of practice left. That is the plan, it seems. So I think that speaks to him. That speaks to his talent. On3 had him as the number one offensive tackle in the country out of that class. So there's a reason for that. And, is it always ideal to have a true freshman go in there and play? Of course not. But if he's going to be the guy and you already feel like he's your best option, go ahead and get him reps now. Like, go ahead and just break the seal and make this happen. I wonder, so there was some talk last year going into the opener about going ahead and starting Tree Babalade that week.
Mm-hmm.
And South Carolina. Now, this is a different game. You're playing in an NFL stadium, neutral site, against a Power 5 at the time opponent. It's a little different decision potentially. But I've always kind of wondered, hey, does South Carolina wish they had just rolled the dice and said, look, Tree, this is not an ideal situation. We think you're our best option. We're just gonna go with the freshman. And
right.
They obviously didn't. In this case, all signs are that they're going with the freshman.
Speaking of the offensive line, he alluded to this later on in Carolina calls. Do you have some injuries that they're dealing with? Ja'Kai Moore and Aaron Parks. Again, Aaron Parks coming in as a transfer. Ja'Kai Moore, somebody that was kind of thought to be in that second wave of guys in the offensive line if he did not make the starting five. So, again, it's not your projected starters that are dealing with injuries, but some key guys that could come into play as the season rolls along that are going to be a little bit banged up here.
Yeah, and Tyler, you don't want to you don't want to make it to be overblown, but at the same time, you don't want to gloss over this. Like you have worked really hard to build depth on that offensive line this year. You knew you were going to have guys injured at some point. You just don't want to start kind of breaking into that depth this early.
Right.
And so hope, it sounded like Parks, he's going to be out for a while. Ja'Kai, maybe back is a little bit, is back as maybe smidge sooner than that. And so I think you got to hope you can get Ja'Kai back and healthy and this not be something that lingers throughout the year, because he's a swing guy for you and that he can play guard or tackle. And without Parks, who are your guys at tackle? Essentially, I guess Tree is maybe now your backup at left and right tackle.
Right.
And so if you lose a guy there, all of a sudden you are starting to be in a situation where it's not to the extent it got last year, but you do start to worry a little bit.
Sure.
So I think they're still fine there. But, Marquis Anderson has been banged up as well.
Yep.
That was a guy, we've talked about it. He could be an absolute stud, but has been, struggling with injury since he arrived on campus. So that's something I think we have to start to monitor, is the health of this offensive line overall, even though nobody is ready to have that conversation yet.
Last night also, he confirmed something that had been swirling rumor-wise for the past couple of days, that Amari Huggins-Bruce no longer with the South Carolina football program. Again, he transferred over this past offseason from the University of Louisville. It does seem like he's back with Louisville, but not on the football team, just as a student. Kind of an odd situation, but this is something you guys have been tracking for a few days.
Yeah, we have. And the interesting thing is this rumor started, and obviously there was some truth to the possibility of him leaving, but it at one point it actually looked like he was going to stay, and there were indications, from him, I think, that maybe he was going to stick around, and then it became official yesterday that he is not. And I think he's a guy you brought in as a transfer. Seemingly, you were thinking and hoping he could be a depth guy. He could be somebody maybe in that second string area. You're talking about a top 6. Could he be in? Was he going to be a starter? Absolutely not. Were you hoping he could be kind of in that backup role? Yes. But I think what it comes down to is him having a vision for how he thought he was going to be used or should be used, right, versus not being able to, win one of those top 6 spots. And so he obviously did not take that very well,
right,
and decided to, I guess, potentially go back to Louisville. I mean, I don't know why you'd go back to Louisville and then not play football, but
yeah, it's a weird situation. And I brought this up to Jack earlier because, Davis Bevel got awarded a scholarship earlier on this week. He had a couple of the walk-ons that got scholarships at the end of last week as well. And Beamer was asked the question in his presser on Tuesday, like, hey, are you now up to your full allotment of scholarships? And he kind of ducked the question, which I did think was a little bit weird, but I imagine it had something to do with this. And Dow Loggins kind of passed the buck when asked about Amari Huggins-Bruce with his media availability the other day. But again, now we have the confirmation that he's no longer with South Carolina, is back at Louisville, and if he wants to play football there, he's going to have to walk back on the team.
Yeah, and, it's 2024. There are ways you can manipulate a walk-on situation. I don't know if that matters anymore for one semester.
Right.
Not even one year, one semester. They'll figure that out, I'm sure. But weird situation, man. Did Louisville lose a receiver to an injury as well? I don't quote me on that. I think I saw a headline about that. So yeah, just an odd situation. Obviously he was coming back home, but did not work out in terms of him getting the projected playing time that it appeared he wanted.
That being said, South Carolina still has plenty of receivers to sort through to see who your main guys are going to be, and we'll learn on Monday what that depth chart looks like and what Chris and I are predicting. A few oars on there, at least for the start of the season when it comes out on Monday ahead of Old Dominion coming up 8 days from now. Again, broadcasting live out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for our 107.5 Game Spring Golf Classic. Also, don't forget tonight, the return of the Love Chevrolet High School Football Show with Justin Hall and Elijah Campbell from 7 to 11 p.m. as they give you all the accounts and action of what's happening in high school across the Columbia and Midlands area as the season is getting underway. We hear more from the coordinators earlier on in the week as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on your Friday here on the game.
All right, y'all. Perfect excuse to go ahead and upgrade the man cave. Hit up our friends at Integrated Media with football right around the corner. I don't know if they can get you hooked up before week 0, but it's not real football anyway. Certainly by week 1, Integrated Media can have you hooked up with a brand new TV. They can hang it on the wall, surround sound, however far you want to take this thing.
they're going to be there right along with you. 803-948-8327 is the phone number. IntegratedMediaInc.com is the website if you want to get a better idea of all their services. They have smart homes, home theater, anything audio and video at your home, TV installations, and, of course, security and cameras as well. And that is just scratching the surface. If you got a vision for what you want that man cave to be or that home audio system to be, they're going to handle it for you. Again, that website, IntegratedMediaInc.com. Phone number 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, out here at Charwood Golf Club for our annual 1075 The Game Summer Golf Classic. I just watched the video of Preston's ceremonial tee shot. We're just going to say it went 400 yards because we can't really prove it otherwise. But
Did it
shot.
go straight?
It looked like it went straight.
Good for him.
Also, the reminder that Preston's a lefty, which I didn't know until he was doing the putting thing. We're out here last year, but looks like that golf shot's come along for him.
Good for him, man. Has he been out here, or is it just all natural?
As far as I know.
No, so he's been practicing?
I would assume so.
Terry says no. Absolutely not.
This is a former Division I athlete, so we can't doubt his athletic abilities.
That's
So.
true. That's true.
But Preston got things rolling this morning. Everybody's out on the course now. Just saw a couple people drive by on golf course. Looks like everybody is having a good time. Dive back into what coordinators were talking about a little bit earlier on this week. Heard from Dow Loggins as well as Clayton White and Ed Bird. If we can here, let's go back to yesterday's list. Get a cut number 5. This is Dow Loggins, who, of course, is a former assistant at Arkansas when Rocket Sanders was there having his great season back in 2022. Here's him answering the question on if this is the same Rocket Sanders from Arkansas a couple seasons ago.
Yeah, unbelievable offseason for him. Came in, got too heavy at Arkansas, 242, and they asked him to, and he did what he was asked to do. But the player I knew at 228, 225, 228 was explosive, catches the ball well, extremely prideful, extremely detailed in his work. You would say, like, at a very young age was a pro. We had good backs at Arkansas, so the competition obviously made him better. But he's coming here and battled through some injuries when he got here, but got with Coach Morton and Coach Jamil Walker and Coach Day and that staff and Clint Haggard, our trainer, and went to work on the rehab. And if I hadn't had the year away from him, the 2 years we spent together at Arkansas, it feels and looks like that same player that's got juice, that's got size, that's a professional. That when he comes in here and goes to work every day, you say that's how you're supposed to practice. That's how you're supposed to prepare. That's how you're supposed to work in the weight room. The first guy's the first guy in every day, and he's going in there with Coach Morton, and they're doing weird stuff like bear crawls and crawling 100 yards and all these things to get his body right and get it back symmetrical. And what a commitment he's made to this program and himself to get himself back to where he needs to be to play well. It's collaborative for sure, and it was last year as well. You know, you bring in different guys with different perspectives, but the best position coaches, and I always took pride in this as being a position coach myself, is like your job is to make the coordinator's job easier, the head coach's job easier. It's being able to coach your guys in the details of the plays, and sometimes it's not always about the scheme, but it's how we coach the scheme and how we utilize our players' skills. So that those guys, when you're able to focus on different things outside of a guy being able to control his room and handle his rotation and then give input when needed and when asked for, like those things definitely help. And when you have guys that they can manage their rooms well, and you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about distractions and off the field problems, and because they're policed well. And the really good position coaches set a standard of discipline where there is no punishment because everyone knows the expectation. And I think that's what those guys, Coach Elliott, Coach Blackwell, and Coach Furry, have been able to help us establish is a little bit more consistency and a little bit more discipline and raising the standard of how you go about your business as well.
Couple good things there from Dow Loggins. Start off with what he was talking about with Rocket Sanders there. And look, we know how good he can be. As we talked about that great season at Arkansas a couple years ago, dealt with the injuries last year. He still had a 100-yard game when he was at good health against Florida a season ago. And all indications from what we've heard this offseason, what you guys have seen out of practice, what we've heard come away from the scrimmages, is that he is in good shape and ready to rock and roll for next Saturday's game against Old Dominion, where he may not get a whole lot of carry at that point in time because you just probably shouldn't need him to beat a team like that, but making sure he's good and 100% ready to go for that week 2 contest against Kentucky.
I think a lot to unpack there actually from Dow Loggins. And, you know, it's a situation where I think we knew he played at a bigger weight last year, but, you know, maybe I've missed it. That's the first time I've heard somebody say, look, he played at 240. It was partially because Arkansas wanted him to bulk up,
right?
It sounds like. And, you know, it sounds great in theory. Hey, get bigger, maintain your speed, you know, be more of a physical run threat while still doing all the other things you can do. But at some point, physics come into play, and maybe you're not the same guy. Maybe you don't have the same explosiveness. You don't have the same wiggle if you're a running back as you do at a smaller size. And so I think that was at play there quite a bit. Does that maybe result in some of his injuries as well? Like I don't want to say that's the reason why, but could it have an effect on that? Yes, it could. So, you know, I think for South Carolina, and I wrote about this today on Gamecock Central, if you are looking at this team, and I go back to those top 100 lists, you know, the video game list comes out, no Gamecocks in the top 100. Right. You're like, okay, that's a video game.
Sure.
Whatever. ESPN list comes out, no Gamecocks in the top 100. And so those lists obviously aren't the end-all, be-all. You're going to have guys emerge. That always happens. You have guys that aren't sort of proven at this point, but then prove themselves as a season goes along and emerge. Could a guy like Lenore Sellers at some point in his career emerge into that national guy, a top 100 player in the country? Of course he could. But while we're talking about this being the deepest roster South Carolina has had in quite some time, to me, if you're going to have the season you want, you have to replace your difference makers. Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette.
Yep.
And that doesn't have to be one-to-one. Doesn't mean it has to be a quarterback and a wide receiver.
Sure.
Difference maker to me, how do you define that? That's a guy who the opposing offense coordinator or defense coordinator, depending on the side of the ball, circles that guy when he starts his game plan on Sunday afternoon. Who can be that guy for South Carolina this year? To me, it's got to be, at least as we're sitting here today before somebody else maybe emerges, it's got to be Rocket Sanders, because we've seen, we know he can do it. We know he physically is capable of doing it. And, you know, Beamer talked to Tyler at media days about how there's a little just lack of talk nationally about what Rocket could mean for this team.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you go back and look, he had a comparable season to Quinshot Judkins 2 years ago.
Yep. They were both top 2 in the SEC, and both those guys, top 10 nationally in rushing yards?
Yep. So to give credit where it's due, Judkins, if you look at the stats, traditional and analytics, he was probably a step above what even Rocket did, as great as Rocket's season was. But Rocket is right there. And I went back and I looked at that ESPN list, and Judkins also a transfer. He's going to a new place as well. So you can't just say, well, he returned to where he was at. ESPN has him 34th in the country and the number 4 running back among everybody in college football.
Right.
But Rocket's not on the list. So that to me tells you, if this is the Rocket we think he is, that gives you an idea just what he could be.
Well, and I think it also proves that these kind of lists are such a what have you done for me lately kind of thing, where, yeah, Rocket Sanders was banged up most of last year, didn't play a whole lot. Again, he had a 100-yard game against Florida, but that's about it because of his injuries, that people, I don't say forgotten about him, but kind of push him to the back burner because he wasn't productive last year, because he wasn't on the field as much. But again, if he can return to that health and form that he had 2 seasons ago, it should be a great season for him at South Carolina. I threw out my bold prediction last hour talking to Chris, and he had a thing they had on Twitter earlier this week, kind of getting people's ideas. And I said that I think both Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders will both have double-digit touchdowns on the ground this season. We obviously know the ground game is going to be a heavy part of what this offense does. He had 10 touchdowns that season at Arkansas. His quarterback, KJ Jefferson, had 9 rushing touchdowns. So hopefully Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders can be just as, if not more productive than that crew had a couple years ago.
My bold prediction is going to be, and I don't know what this record is, might be Marcus Lattimore. My bold prediction is going to be that Rocket Sanders, I don't want to say sets the record, but is the most productive running back South Carolina has had in the passing game in quite some time.
Okay.
A lot of people forget, and Beamer mentioned his ability in pass pro, but this kid came in as a wide receiver.
Yeah. Was he? I thought he was an athlete out of high school.
Yeah, but he was recruited by Justin Stepp.
Okay.
So, yeah, he was an athlete on his profile, but like a lot of teams wanted him to play receiver.
Right.
So, you know, you look at a lot of running backs, even the ones that have good hands, they're a little bit limited in what you ask them to do in the passing game. It's it's screen, it's, you know, swing passes, it's angle routes, it's little, you know, you're a check down, stuff like that. This is a guy, Arkansas, they would motion him out of the backfield, put him out on the edge. He's running, you know, wheel routes, balls down the field, fade balls at times, I think.
Right.
This is a guy, if I'm Dow Loggins and I'm really sitting down looking at what puzzle pieces I may have, and receiver is still, I mean, Beamer said it again yesterday. Dow Loggins said it on Thursday.
Yep.
Or Wednesday. Hey, the guys have not emerged yet.
Right. We'll continue on the conversation of what Dow Loggins had to say. Talk about the assistants coming up next. Broadcasting live at Charwood Golf Club, 107.5 The Game Summer Golf Classic going until noon. Tyler and West here on The Game.
All right, guys. Of course, every single episode of this show, we tell you about our friends, our presenting sponsor, Firehouse Subs. Head on over to firehousesubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. Hopefully, I mean, guys, if you haven't gotten the app yet, what are you even doing? Try this new. If you want something, just something different, something new, try this Firehouse Captain's Club. I had the chance to try it actually earlier this week. It's got chicken, it's got bacon, it's got this special Captain Sorensen's hot sauce that actually puts it completely over the top. Just an excellent sub, as are all the subs at Firehouse Subs. And the great part about it is if you go to firehousesubs.com or order on the app, there is a sub for you, regardless of what your tastes are. My favorite, number one, still brisket, add bacon, but whatever you like, there's one for you. Head on over to firehousesubs.com or, as always, hit that Firehouse Subs app.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell along with you on your Friday out at Charwood for our 107.5 game. Summer Golf Classic. Continue our conversation about what we heard from Dow Loggins there. It was a couple minutes of him talking about Rocket Sanders. We also transitioned talking about his assistants as well. And this offense looks totally different from a personnel standpoint, not only on the field, when it comes to the coaches as well. You obviously have Mike Ferdy coming in as wide receivers coach. You got Sean Elliott as the tight ends coach and run game coordinator. Marquell Blackwell coming in as the running backs coach. So a completely new set of assistants underneath Dow Loggins, guys with a lot of experience as well. As, of course, you have 2 former head coaches. Blackwell had been a former OC himself. And you do wonder how that relationship dynamic works, given the fact that all these guys have been in those high-level coaching spots, now having to be underneath Dow Loggins, but also an opportunity for a lot of collaboration with a lot of very smart football minds.
Yeah, and ultimately, it's got to be the OC's final call on a lot of these things. Like that's going to be his job, is to handle those things. And I think the places where it works best is where that OC can take all the different things that they're hearing and they can use it as a collaboration, like not being hard-headed, not being stubborn, but on the other side, also being willing to say no, like, hey, actually, we're going to do it this way. And it's ultimately my call. I think your assistants have to be willing to give input. And, I saw something, I can't remember if it was Urban Meyer or Ryan Day, somebody involved with Ohio State. They basically said, look, the job of the assistant is when you're in these meetings to have conviction about how you feel about something, have conviction about, oh, we need to do this, or we need to play this guy, or this. I love this concept. And now, once you have shown conviction and I think this assistant was like, basically, if I've told the guy above me, whether it's head coach or offense coordinator, if I've told him twice, that's the way I want it to be done. And then they're like, well, no, actually, I still think we need to do it this way.
Right.
At that point, it becomes, well, this is your boss. This is the guy who has been tasked with building this offense or building this team. Then you have to know when to fall back. And we can have these conversations. We can have some near arguments in a closed door meeting.
Sure.
But when we go out there, when we take it from the meetings into the meetings with the players, and we're discussing what we're going to do, whatever that guy has decided, whatever that OC has decided, I'm behind it 100%. Whether I was 5 minutes ago or not,
right?
You're never going to see any hint of that. So I do think it is important that you have professionals who are willing to go about it those ways. But if you can do it, and Beamer said yesterday at the call-in show, like he made a point to say, look, this has been for a new staff. These guys have all connected very well together. That has to continue through the season, obviously, but they've been, I would say, borderline obsessed with fixing this running game. And you can look at that at every new running backs coach, a run game coordinator. They didn't really have that role previously at South Carolina, at least recently. New offensive lineman from high school and transfer portal ranks. And then, of course, an entirely new running backs room. So every step of the way, every spot along the way, as far as your running game, your rushing attack, has been changed. So I think ultimately it's about, can all those guys work together to be collaborative, but then know where it has to stop as well.
And I think it's important to revisit this. We talked about it when Sean Elliott was hired as the tight ends coach and run game coordinator, the dynamic of being the coordinator for just the run game in addition to what Dow Loggins is doing. So it is more about Sean Elliott putting the pieces in place, and then Dow Loggins, of course, calling the play. But again, this is different than just what you have with Marquell Blackwell as just a straight up running backs coach here.
Yeah, completely different. If you're run game coordinator, you have some say, and again, and that's a line that both sides have to walk as well. Like ultimately, Dow Loggins is the coordinator, so he knows that when this thing ends, when the season is over, people are going to look back. If it went well, he's going to get the credit, and he should. If it goes poorly, then he's going to take a lot of the blame, and he should. That's what that title means. But I do think you have somebody at your disposal who has shown they can put together rushing attacks that involve running quarterbacks. That I think if Steve Spurrier, the best play caller offensively of the modern era, can bring in somebody from App State and be willing to listen and be willing to really adjust his entire running game, then I think that says something about Sean Elliott and what his offensive mind is. So again, it's going to be all about walking that line between doing what Dow has done in the past, what he wants to do, and then just taking all these different concepts. Does this running game look like the Arkansas offense with KJ Jefferson? Does it look more like Sean Elliott at Georgia State and at South Carolina years prior? Does it look more like what Loggins himself wants to do? What do they steal from Shula with what he was doing with Cam Newton and the Panthers?
Right.
Can you simplify all that and make it work as a cohesive offense? I think is one of your big final questions about this scheme.
And again, with the skill set that you have in Lenore Sellers, not to mention the talent that you have in the running back room, it's going to be such a big part of this offense. And again, we don't know what that split looks like, 60-40, 70-30, or something along those lines. But it was funny, we were talking about bold prediction the last hour, and Chris said somebody had thrown out there that they think South Carolina's going to be a top 25 rushing offense in college football this year, which would be a sizable jump from where they were a season ago. So I don't know if it's going to be that extreme, but funny enough, when he was looking up the stats, the 25th best rushing offense in all of college football last year, Georgia State, where Sean Elliott was. So again, it's something that is obviously a part of his coaching style, and has a previous tenure at South Carolina of being involved in that too. So I think we're all excited to see what he can bring to the table to hopefully elevate that game back to where it's been in years past.
Yeah, and Beamer was talking at the call-in show as well about Steve Fink when putting together the media guide. I think I got these numbers right. When South Carolina has rushed for 100 yards, they've lost 3 games in the Beamer era. I think they're 15-3.
Right.
When they've rushed for 100 yards, which Beamer was pointing out, that's not a $150. That's not 200. That's not some. It's not some massive day. Just 100 yards.
Sure.
And they win at a very high clip. So it's not exciting to talk about necessarily, but that the age-old adage of, hey, if you run the football and you stop the run, all the other stuff, yes, matters. But ultimately, it gets back to, can you do those things? And if you do, chances are you increase your chances of winning. And, I go back as well to being a play caller and knowing you have the running game in your back pocket.
Sure.
That is invaluable. You can call so many other things. You open up such a world of opportunity when if you have a second and 10 that you can get into a 3rd and 5.
Right.
That I don't want to say anybody can call plays at that point, but
Sure.
It makes it so much easier.
Well, that's what was frustrating about the team last year is, Dow Loggins trying to make the running game work, but routinely only getting at most maybe a yard or 2 on first down. Then suddenly you're in 2nd and 9 or 2nd and 8. If you have an incomplete pass or somebody drops the ball, then suddenly you're in 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 9, which is something they ran into quite a bit of season ago. So yes, you can get some chunks on those first couple of downs to put yourself in better position for 3rd and shorts and so on and so forth. That hopefully will lead to this offense as a whole being better as the season goes along. And hopefully, and look, they only average 85 rushing yards a game over the course of the entire season last year. So that's not a high bar to clear, but hopefully they clear by quite a bit and can be in the mix of at least maybe a top half team in the SEC when it comes to rushing.
Yeah, I think just improving on that number, that's not even part of your goal.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think you gotta with all the changes they've made to the running game, if it's just like, oh, they improved that number by 7 yards a game, that's not good enough.
Sure.
I think. And I think the staff, I think Beamer would tell you the same thing. I think they have much higher expectations for what this running game could be and should be than just clearing that number.
Absolutely. And again, we're only 8 days away from kickoff between South Carolina and Old Dominion. By the way, if you want all the up-to-date and insight coverage of what's going on with South Carolina football, you guys at Gamecock Central have got that covered and got a special deal going on for folks right now.
Limited time offer just in time for kickoff. New subscribers can get 50% off an annual membership to Gamecock Central. Come on over. That code is kickoff24, all one word. Again, of course, we're covering this thing every single step of the way. If you want to take it to another level, please come on over, support our work, subscribe to Gamecock Central, and hang out with us on the Insiders Forum.
We'll wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Up next, a couple of former Gamecocks getting a high honor with a Hall of Fame. That's coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
All right, guys. As always, let me tell you about our friends over at Gold Line Framing. Kendall and Joni, they're going to take great care of you and any and all of your custom framing needs, from diplomas to original artwork, canvases, jerseys, and flags. They've been in business for over 20 years. So just head on over to 511 12th Street, West Columbia, where you can check out their art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items, all in store. By the way, next week, what did I tell you? Thursday, we're going to be out there live from Gold Line Framing, 9 a.m. to noon. So if you want to see us, if you want to, I'm sure we'll have some tickets for you, maybe have some other prizes as well. So come on out, go ahead, put it on your calendar exactly, I guess, 6 days from now. Come on out and see us at 511 12th Street in West Columbia. If you already have some custom framing ideas, call Gold Line Framing today, 803-739-1337. Again, that number, 803-739-1337. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Mitchell wrapping up the 11 o'clock hour. We'll get out to Terry Ford for the halftime show. I believe he's out at hole number 17, going up from noon until 3. And Jay and Elijah will be back in the studio because Jay sweats too much and can't be out on the golf course. So he's got to be in the nice air-conditioned studio to do the show today. So don't have to worry about sweaty Jay. Wow.
You heard the sweaty Jay stories? It's pretty bad.
No, I don't think I want to, though.
Yeah, well, if you're grossed out by sweat, then Jay is not the person to be hanging around with because he does it quite a lot. So again, that'll be coming up from.
Call him out, Tyler.
Well, he's very open about it, so it's always funny. I wanted to hit this before we got out of here. Last night, the 9 selections for South Carolina's Letterman's Hall of Fame were announced. Some pretty notable names on that list: Farrell Cooper of football, Tiffany Mitchell of basketball, no relation to Wes, and of course our guy Tommy Moody also being selected to that list as well. Which of course we lost him last October, and something that I'm sure he'd be very, very proud of, especially considering the fact he was so involved in this process himself for all those years. I think he actually did the Hall of Fame induction just a couple days before his passing last year, actually.
Yeah, and he loved this stuff. He loved being able to honor the past greats at South Carolina. And, I don't know if Tommy ever knew just how highly thought of. Hopefully he had an idea, but I don't know if he knew just how highly thought of he was by Gamecock Nation. So this is a special honor for him, obviously, and a well-deserved one for him and all the other former student athletes on this list. Obviously, with football, you look at Farrow, you look at Melvin Ingram, 2 guys that played in the NFL, 2 guys that were just dynamic players here at South Carolina. And, 2 completely different players, obviously. Farrow being an offensive weapon. I think that's what you had to call him. Like, he could do anything. And Steve Spurrier used him in a variety of ways. And then Melvin Ingram, who was just phenomenal who was coached by another Gamecock who's gone too soon, in the late great Brad Lawing. Mm-hmm. Just a guy that, and Melvin's stuck in the league for a long time now.
Yeah.
One of the best athletes to ever play for the University of South. Like, this guy, Melvin Ingram, could throw a football like 75 yards.
Yeah. No, it's very rare you have somebody in your defensive front that can score special teams touchdowns.
Yeah, you remember that
multiple ones at that. Yeah, I remember that one very well. I've never seen somebody that big move that fast. He was running away from the other guys on Georgia's special teams. And what did he play at? He was a monster.
270 something.
Insanity. Dude was a freak.
You know, he came in as a linebacker.
How much weight did he have to put on?
It wasn't he have to. He just did. He just put on. And Brad Long basically was like, "You're a defensive lineman now."
Right.
And that, as the story goes, maybe we can ask Melvin the specifics. But as the story goes, back then, he was like, "No, I'm not a defensive lineman."
Yeah.
And they're like, "No, you are." And there was a little bit of pushback.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think once it like clicked, he was like, "Oh, I'm good at this."
Yeah.
And so Carolina, the thing about Melvin, they would move him around and they'd put him out on the edge. They on pass rush downs, they'd move him inside, and he'd just be this quick, just freak of nature guy that guards and centers could not deal with. So when you're talking about pairing that guy up with Jadeveon Clowney at the same time, and some of the other guys they had, Devin Taylor, who was really good. I mean, that was a freakish defensive front.
If they weren't scary enough, him and Jadeveon Clowney both wore single digits, which you have to be a dude on the defensive front to wear single digits.
Is that the rule? You have to
that's
be
the rule.
Stud.
It makes you look bigger because that number's smaller, just like what Deion Walker at Kentucky wears number 0 and makes him look twice as big because he already is.
Where does Kentucky keep getting those guys?
I don't know, but he's
my gosh.
He's a refrigerator and a half in the middle of that defensive front, and Carolina's gonna have to deal with him here in a couple weeks. But he's certainly a dude, much like Melvin Ingram was on that defensive front. Again, Pharaoh Cooper and all he did for South Carolina, and again Tiffany Mitchell and several other great student athletes for South Carolina. Well-deserved honor for all of them being able to go into this National Letterman Hall of Fame.
When I think of Tiffany Mitchell, I think of somebody who was one of the original superstars for Dawn Staley. Played 2012, 2016.
Yep.
And I remember Sweet 16 run, and just kind of like she would have fit in
sure
on these current teams, but was a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of South Carolina getting a player of her caliber, and her just being an absolute superstar here. So she was really, really fun to watch.
Well, and it's players like her that set the table for what this dynasty has become. Of course, they won the national championship the year after she had left, but it's her success and the girls that came along with her that, really turned this program into what it's become now, is literally the best program in all of women's college basketball.
Yeah, and you had some of her numbers pulled up there. She was special, and well, I actually did not remember that she was a 3-time All-American.
Yep.
2-time SEC Player of the Year, 2-time National Player of the Year finalist, team's first ever Final Four, and was the leading scorer on South Carolina's first SEC regular season championship team. That is special.
For sure. Well-deserved honor by everyone. Very excited as well for the family of our guy Tommy Moody. A well-deserved honor for him as well. Appreciate everybody for hanging out with us here at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Terry out at hole number 17 coming up next. Halftime show here on The Game.
All right, before I hand it over to Terry, let me tell you about our friends over at Midland's Home Renovations. If you've been dreaming of that home makeover, maybe you're just not sure where to start. Do what we do here. Call Midland's Home Renovations. That phone number, 803-402-3953. Or you can just head on over to midlandshomerenovations.com for more information. They specialize in whole home kitchen and bath transformations. And as one of the top-rated general contractors in all the Midlands, you can rest assured your home is being placed in great hands. From modern kitchens to luxurious baths to that sunroom add-on you've all been dreaming of, they can take your vision, take those ideas, take those thoughts you have about what your home could be, and bring that vision to life. Call Andrew today. Again, that number 803-402-3953, or visit midlandshomerenovations.com to see their work and bring your home vision to life. Again, that number one more time, 803-402-3953.